on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It is 6:06. It's O'Connor and Company here on this Monday morning, Martin Luther King Observance Day, and a happy one to you as well. If you don't have to go to school or work and you're just sort of hunkering down, you're watching the snowfall, you're watching it stick, you're watching people slip on the sidewalk as they walk around. That's fun. Enjoy it. If you do have to venture out, though, be careful. We got you covered. Every 10 minutes on the fives, you'll hear from Jamie Whitten with our traffic and weather, so there's no need to go wandering anywhere else. We'll give you all the information you need right when you need it. Coming up at 6:35, Dr. Jennifer London, author of Profiles in Character, one chapter in that book that we've been talking about quite a bit this year, features Dr. Martin Luther King, so we will talk to her. Also at 7:05, Joe DeGenova will join us. 7:35, our man in Iowa, Brian Wilson, a familiar voice to morning radio listeners here in Washington, D.C. He will be live from Iowa for the caucuses tonight. And then at 8:35, Dr. Marty McCary on the slow creep of masks back in our life. That's all coming up. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock. Julie, you can take the mask off now. It's time to broadcast.
I sound a little muzzled. Sound a little like I'm
talking
underwater.
When we had to go down to, we did CPAC in Orlando 2 years ago when we were still, because Maryland was not having it. Actually, I guess it was 3 years ago now that I think about it. It was CPAC 2021. We were live in Orlando, and when we first started on Radio Row, they had these security guards coming around telling everybody that we had to mask up on Radio Row. Yeah, and I'm like, I'm on the radio. I'm not going to wear a mask while I'm on the radio. What is wrong with you? It's why we're in Florida. DeSantis, take care of this. And he did, actually.
Unbelievable.
That didn't last long.
Wild times. Wow. Yeah. Anyway.
We also had wild times at the White House over the weekend. Take a listen to this. This is the sound of a pro-Hamas terrorist demonstration in front of the White House. That just sounds like, your typical near-violent, fiery, but peaceful protest that we so often in Washington, D.C. But what was that one part? It was pretty clear you could hear it. That down. One part that got broken out. Here, listen. Break it down! Break it down. And that wasn't, for a hip-hop dance-off or anything. Break it down. No, it wasn't MC Hammer. No, when they said break it down, they were talking about a security fence that had been erected to protect the White House grounds. They were pushing against it. They were shaking it. Some people were trying to climb over it. And as you heard from the one encouraging their protester there, they were trying to break it down.
They did breach at one point. They almost breached it. And a number of police officers had to sort of stand as a bulwark against these people and keep them from further breaking down the fence. Now, it's been very interesting watching this happen, Larry, because the mainstream media, I'm not a shocker. It seems, first of all, no one's talking about this.
Yeah, not much coverage.
And certainly we haven't seen any press conferences. We haven't seen any Democrats come to the podium talking about how many police officers were injured, how this is an attack on our democracy and on the White House and blah, blah, blah. None of that. No, none of that.
Julie, you cannot expect black women to be perfect and save the world, all right?
That's right.
You're absolutely right. There hasn't been much coverage. I was watching the Sunday shows. They didn't really cover it much either. It was, it was reminiscent of the George Floyd Black Lives Matter riots that ended up with a near arson of a historic church right in front of Lafayette Square. Also, the statue of Lafayette was defaced. He was given a hijab. Or what do they call the scarf? Not a hijab. Hijab is what the women wear. The terrorist scarf with the white and black. Keffiyeh. Yeah. He got one of those. He got a Palestinian flag draped around his belly there. Lafayette did, climbing up on the statue. They love defacing and tearing down statues.
Yeah, they do.
That's what the left does. It was complete chaos. At one point, as you say, Julio Rosas, of course, who covers these things, he wrote a book called Fiery but Mostly Peaceful. He has a video showing how the D.C. Police and Secret Service had to rush to one part of the security fence to prevent it from being breached. No arrests were made.
None.
Not one person was arrested.
Yep.
Not one person was arrested. Julie Kelly, journalist who covers January 6th like no one else, has looked through thousands of hours of footage of the events of January 6th. She took to social media, as you can imagine, to criticize how the police handled that day's events versus how the police in front of the White House handled this weekend's events. She said, "Where are the flashbangs and the sting balls and tear gas? Where are the beatings with batons?" You'll remember before the White House, before the Capitol grounds were breached, and before people, en masse on the north side of the Capitol, tried to penetrate and get into the doors, they were shot with pellets. They were shot with tear gas.
Yes.
They were beaten back with batons. And the funny thing about people, when people get shot with the pellet balls or with the hit with batons or shot with tear gas,
makes them mad.
Well, one of two things happen usually. Usually either people run away and disperse, or actually the opposite things happen. And they actually go after the people who were hitting them, which in this case was the Capitol Police. And many people look at the video of January 6th and say, "Oh, they're actually trying to egg them on. They're actually trying to rile them up and get them to come toward them." That you can use your own judgment. I certainly see some unorthodox police tactics being used on January 6th. What I will tell you, and it doesn't take an expert eye to notice, the pro-Hamas, pro-Palestinian, pro-terrorist protesters this weekend were treated entirely differently than the protesters on January 6th. You don't need to be an expert to figure that out.
Well, and also these people are not going to be stalked and harassed and hounded and tracked down by a Department of Justice. They will walk back to their lives, and they'll maybe come back next weekend or whatever. But this is not going to be the subject of endless hearings on Capitol Hill, and again, a Justice Department that ignores actual crime and other things going on in the country to pursue these people. That will not happen.
As Julie Kelly said, especially referring to the video where the protesters nearly tear down the security fence. Oh, by the way, quickly, before I get to Julie Kelly's observation, the security fence that was used to protect the White House, it was 10 feet tall. It was reinforced. There was enough Secret Service and and Metropolitan Police and probably Park Service Police to be able to actually respond if the fence got breached.
Interesting how those
because they were
work.
prepared for this, and that's the correct kind of security that you do on a federal building that might be breached by angry protesters. On January 6th, they had the little bike racks.
Yep.
They had the bike racks that go up to your waist, and they had a small handful of Capitol Police officers whose main job usually is to just screen people.
Despite there being warnings.
Yes, despite all the warnings.
People are going to gather. There could be some anger.
Despite President Trump pre-authorizing the National Guard should Nancy Pelosi and Muriel Bowser ask for it.
Yeah.
That wasn't there. But boy, they were set up, and they had the proper 10-foot tall fencing and everything all set up there. But then when they tried to rip down the fencing, again, I want to bring Julie Kelly into the mix, and I'll tell you what she observed in this video of how the pro-Hamas protesters treated the fencing versus how the criminal case against the Proud Boys transpired with the bike rack barriers that got breached on January 6th. That's in a moment. First, though, it's snowing out, man. There's snow on the ground. There's ice on the ground. The commute is going to be yucky at 6:15. WMAL traffic and weather every 10 minutes. First up.
WMAL, making sense of the headlines because common sense isn't so common. Download the WMAL app to stream us for free.
Yeah, that was the chaotic sound captured by independent journalist Julio Rosas out in front of the White House over the weekend. Also, they were really, really courteous, these protesters, as they brought their own smoke bombs to the festival. That's red and green colored smoke bombs, which of course those are illegal as well in the District of Columbia. Any incendiary device like that is illegal, but it also adds to the chaotic feel. It makes people disoriented. It's
red and green, the colors of murder, rape, and hostage taking. How nice.
Oh, I thought they were just left over from Christmas.
Possibly. You're right.
I mean,
right. We'll go with that.
Know. Maybe.
Stop being so positive.
Julie Kelly, again, who observed all of the trials of the January 6th defendants, she makes a good point. She said, I watched during the Proud Boys as a defense attorney went through an excruciating video demonstration to raise doubt that one of the Proud Boys touched a temporary fence on Capitol grounds on January 6th. So, in other words, the prosecutors were saying these Proud Boys need to go to jail for, 15 years for insurrection, although they were never charged with insurrection. That should be pointed out. Because the reason for his culpability is that he touched a temporary fence that had put up. And again, the fences were like little bike racks that were, 6 feet tall, 4 feet tall. That we had to, you point to and say, look, they should go away for a decade. These people were pushing these 10-foot fences around, trying to push them over so they could get to the White House, and tried to breach them and climb up them. They are pushing them and rattling them. You can see it on the video. Again, I want to reiterate, not one arrest made. Not one arrest made. And there's another thing here. Say what you will about January 6th, and I know a lot of people have strong feelings. I have strong feelings about January 6th. I don't think everybody who was involved on the ground there on January 6th in breaching the Capitol was innocent, that railroaded, all that jazz. I mean, there were some people guilty of criminal behavior.
Reasonable people can agree on that, but 26 years for while you're in Baltimore?
It's ridiculous. So I know a lot of people have strong opinions about January 6th, but here's one thing that is absolutely undeniable. The intent of the protesters on January 6th stemmed from their very real, very rational and sincere belief that the 2020 presidential election broke all norms with regard to ballot security and the process that we normally go through to determine the Electoral College results.
That's right.
And that is an undeniable fact. Now, you may say there was nothing illegal. I didn't use the word illegal. I didn't say the word stolen. I said that it was extraordinary and outside of the norm that we have ever experienced in American democratic process to elect our leaders. All right? But their intent, the people's intent on January 6th, was their anger and frustration over that and the fact that they didn't think their voices were heard. Over the weekend, the protesters who were trying to breach the security fence around the White House, they were supporting a terrorist organization. They are openly supporting a terrorist organization that just slaughtered over 1,000 people on October 7th and continue to hold innocent Americans hostage as we speak. How are these the good guys? How are these the people who don't get arrested, Julie?
And these are not sort of deaths in the heat of war, in the fog of war. These are terrorists who set people on fire.
Yeah.
That raped little girls and broke their pelvises.
And decapitated babies.
This is the most monstrous, like, my imagination, some of the stuff I've learned about October 7th, my mind doesn't work that way. I couldn't conceive of that kind of torture and pain and murder. I can't think of that stuff on my own. Yeah. And yet now I know because of what these monsters, these animals did. And this is who's supporting them on that fence.
By the way, Julie, I'm looking at this headline from the Daily Mail. The White House staff, because of the chaos in front of the White House and in front of the old executive office building, White House staff was relocated during the riots. You made a keen observation about this.
Yeah, I saw this. It was funny. I was just like, I was making breakfast for my kids yesterday morning, and I was scrolling through Daily Mail, and I see this headline that says White House staff are relocated as pro-Palestine protesters threaten to breach security. I was like, wait a minute, relocated? Is that what we're calling the evacuation of White House staff because of a terrorist threat? Literally. If this had been Trump supporters, it would have been like, terrorists try to breach the White House, and there was an evacuation.
We had to evacuate people to the bunker.
We're just relocating people to the Hilton across the street. Yeah,
it's a relocation effort. That's all. You're just going to be relocated.
I sort of mentioned, like, okay, this is the pouncing. They have all these this pathology in the media of how they talk, and relocating is the word of the day.
It's a fine use of the English language there, and apparently in the midst of the orderly relocation process of the White House staff, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez hid in her bathroom under the sink, terrified. It's 6:23.
Now on 105.9 FM and streaming worldwide on the WMAL app.
O'Connor and Company.
It's 6:37 here on this Martin Luther King Jr. Day. I hope you're having a good one. I hope you don't have to go anywhere because, as you just heard from Jamie Whitten, there is snow still on the ground, still falling. It is sticking. It is cold. It is slick, and it could be dangerous. We're going to keep an eye on it and continue to give you detailed traffic and weather reports every 10 minutes as the morning goes on. Also coming up at 7:05, Joe DeGeneva will be here. 7:35, our man in Iowa, Brian Wilson. That's right. It's the Iowa caucus today. And as we whine about the wintry weather, let's just keep in mind it could be Iowa.
That's right.
It is not good there. And at 8:35, Dr. Marty McCary. I'm Larry O'Connor alongside Julie Gunlock.
Good morning.
You get to have a house full of children.
Boys.
Today because of the holiday.
Yes.
Oh, boy.
Well, we're taking the Christmas decorations down, so it's good to have them home.
Oh, that's fun.
They can help
Oh, but
me.
sad. That's always a sad
Yeah.
task. Hot
Yeah,
cocoa
yeah.
and marshmallows will make
That's
that
right.
better. Joining us right now on this Martin Luther King Day is a friend of the program. She's co-author of the book Profiles in Character, along with her husband, Jack London. She is Dr. Jennifer London, and she joins us now. Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. London.
Good morning, Julie and Larry. It's good to be here.
Oh, thank you for being here because we've talked about your book, and it's so cool the way you take multiple iconic American stories and tell us a story specifically about how events in their life shaped their character, and that made them the leaders that they were. And certainly you can't tell the American story of the past 240 years without focusing on Martin Luther King. So it's perfect for you to join us today. Thank you. Tell us about how you sort of told Martin Luther King's story in this respect with regard to how his character sort of drove him through some pretty tough times.
Well, the book, Profiles in Character, 16 Americans and the Traits That Define Them, are about 16 iconic Americans who really defined history. And, of course, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. is a role model for the ages. Throughout the ages, there have been rare individuals who had to make some monumental decisions and take some risks and stand up for their beliefs and the causes that they believed in. And that's what Profiles in Character is about. We also profiled Frederick Douglass and Harriet Tubman, but Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Had a very unique trait that we profile in the book, and that is the trait of love. And it really evolved in his childhood. I mean, he said himself that he had a sense of optimism that grew out of having a very secure and loving childhood. And so he said, it's quite easy for me to think of the universe as basically friendly. He grew up in a family with love, where it was central and where he said there were lovely relationships. And so you'd see throughout his life when he approached the Montgomery bus boycott, he did it with peaceful resistance. That was his approach throughout his life. And he encouraged others to approach, racial differences the same way. And in fact, he drew upon the work of Mahatma Gandhi, who his concept of satyagraha, that means truth or love, and agraha means force. It was a way of using, again, that peaceful resistance or love to move other people. And so Martin Luther King, I think his most dominant trait of love really did make a difference. And it culminated in 1963 with the March on Washington, when he gave the famous I Have a Dream speech, which actually accelerated the Civil Rights Act of 1964.
Doctor, I'm a big fan of this book, and I have actually bought it for people for young people graduating from high school, for instance. These stories are so inspirational, but I think they're in particular important for young people today. You talk about how these individuals that you feature, they had great difficulty in their life path. They chose these very risky life paths, but it came with high rewards, though not for themselves. That is not being People are not being encouraged today in our sort of age of social media and influencers. They're not being sort of encouraged to pursue these things that will help society in general. Rather, they're just told, be an influencer and elevate yourself. Why is this so important that we explain to young people today that there's a world out there that's greater than themselves and they should work to improve it?
Yeah, I think when you look at Martin Luther King Jr., he was a 26-year-old when he became the face of the civil rights movement. And he took on that responsibility, and that's what we see in the book. People who understood their impact on society, not their impact on themselves. And unfortunately, I think our digital world has caused many, especially our young people, to really be self-focused. And it is a hurdle, but I think books like this will help inspire individuals to unleash, the power of their own character, so that they can have the courage to make a positive impact on society. It's not easy. I mean, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. was threatened throughout his life. I mean, he was stabbed. His house was bombed. I mean, there were so many things that happened to him. And yet at one point, when he reached a point where he had lost his courage, he had an epiphany where he felt God had talked to him and said, I will be with you. It gave him the courage. And from that point on, he never looked back. He continued to move forward. So I think faith plays a big part in these stories, but there's the inner strength that I think individuals can pull from their own character.
Well, and because you're right, he faced violent threats his entire life, and of course he was eventually assassinated, and frankly, because of the way he conducted himself in a nonviolent way in these protests, and the righteousness of his cause facing against injustice, it actually made his assassination that much more significant in keeping his memory and keeping the spirit of what he was fighting for alive. Even in death, his message continues to be powerful and impossible to deny. Dr. Jennifer London, we got to leave it there, but I love the book. It's a great coffee table book, and it's also a great book to send off with your kid in college and high school. Great homeschool book. It's called Profiles in Character, and I very much recommend it. Thank you, Dr. London. Thank you. It's always a great conversation.
Thank you. A pleasure. And all proceeds go to military organizations.
Well, it is on. It is on, Julie Gunlock. It is on like Donkey Kong is what it is. We are in the middle of it. Tonight is the night. It's the Iowa caucus, and this is, of course, Presidential Election Central here. Not just this program, but this entire radio station. We are dedicated to giving you the full coverage of Donald Trump winning the Republican nomination. I mean, of who might win the Republican nomination as the process goes forward. The question tonight is not who will win. Trump is going to win. The question is how close is it? And they're going to hype up whoever finishes in second place, especially if it's Nikki Haley.
Right.
If Nikki Haley comes in second by 20 points, they'll go nuts. They'll be like, "Oh my God, this is groundbreaking. She's a comer. They're gonna do whatever they can to hype her up." The final poll that came out from the Des Moines Register, which is usually pretty solid, shows Trump at 48, Haley at 20, and DeSantis at 16. If DeSantis doesn't finish in second, it would be devastating because he has put everything into Iowa. And am I that out of touch with where Republican voters are? But I am shocked to see that 20% of Iowa voters are leaning toward Nikki Haley.
I am too, but she's put a lot of money there, and there's a lot of sort of establishment support. She's raising incredible money, and now it's funny because I was sort of reading different articles about this, and there's this whole theory that there's this deal behind the scenes between Trump and Haley's campaigns, and she'll be his VP check, and that's why he attacked Vivek this weekend as a way to sort of shore up those votes that might go to Vivek instead of Trump. So it's all very interesting. I don't necessarily understand it either.
Well, there's no reason to get out ahead of it. We'll see what happens tonight, and then we'll analyze it tomorrow. But I will tell you this: if people are trying to figure out where the electorate is and where the Republican base is, Larry Hogan, former governor of Maryland, and we speculated last week that he might want to run on the no labels ticket. He announced that he's not running for president, and he is throwing all of his weight behind Nikki Haley.
But doesn't he know Ace is still in the race?
Wait, there's another one.
Ace is not in the race. Wait, sorry.
Not only has Nikki Haley secured the Larry Hogan contingent of the Republican Party, but she has also locked up the Bill Kristol segment. Bill Kristol, who actually he began his endorsement in this way. I'm an ex-Republican.
Ex-Republican.
But if I were an Iowan, I'd be crossing back over to vote for Haley Monday. And that's the key. See, in Iowa, at these caucuses, Democrats can show up. And then they can wreak havoc on the process. And the Democrats aren't having a democratic process for their nomination.
Oh.
They have no choice. It's
Right.
Biden, so there's nothing
Right.
for them to do. So
Oh, no.
depending on what might happen here,
Oh.
if people want to hurt Trump, as he said, voting against Trump in Republican caucuses and primaries is the most effective way and a legal, legitimate way to oppose Trump this winter and spring. That's Bill Kristol's endorsement, not just for Nikki Haley, but an endorsement for Democrats to come out and vote for Nikki Haley. So that's
Who knows?
Listen, coming up, we're going to speak with our man in Iowa, Brian Wilson. He will be joining us at 7:35. Right now, it's